The ICJ hearing several weeks ago was a hugely significant news item. The channel that has replaced the news channel, there was hardly any of the South African submission on day one, and yet hours and hours of the Israeli submission on day two. Have you looked into the disaster that was in terms of impartiality, because it wasn't impartial?
We've had lots of, as you know, I get feedback of significant feedback from people on either side, if we can simplify even as either side on this, in this.
I don't think there's two sides to this. I think there's an issue of impartiality.
I mean,
and
David may look at it, but we did cover in detail that ruling.
I watched it, all of it.
And I'm just talking on one outlet in terms of we can debate the ins and outs of that. But overall, I think we've been pretty robust in covering the ICJ proceedings.
Do you think it was fair to have a tiny bit of the South African submission and then switch to the post office, which again is a very, very important story?
I think
I'm not decrying that.
Overall,
but then have hours and hours the next day of the other side's submission. You think that was fair and impartial?
Well, I think on the rolling news channel, you've got, in terms of selections, in terms of what's going.
Do you think that was fair and impartial?
I think
balanced?
I think overall, when you look at our coverage on the rulings, we've been in a reasonable position.
David, do you think it was fair and impartial? The coverage of those 2 days of hearings I'm talking about, not the rest of the news.
I think you've put your finger on something very important about what happened, because it only happened on our UK output. The international output covered the two sides of that conflict and of the presentations that were made to the ICJ. They covered them equally in our international coverage. But in our UK coverage, because the hearing on the post office was being held at the same time, they made the editorial decision to go with the post office coverage rather than the other coverage, which, as you could tell, was a very difficult decision to make. When news looked at it in retrospect, they did think that perhaps they'd made a mistake in not making the two live coverage events similar or the same, but they did make all the other coverage was very similar and the same and was very, very comprehensive. So it was just about the live coverage on the news channel on those 2 days, which wasn't absolutely equivalent. And in this particular conflict, if you don't have absolute equivalence, as you know, it leads to people suspecting that you're doing something deliberately to be biased. That isn't the case. It was genuinely a difficult editorial decision about which hearing they went with.
You think that was a mistake to do the coverage?
News have said that if they thought about it again, they might have done it differently.